Previously, we looked at in the early 20th century nationalism in China. Today, we're going to take a look at its neighboring state to the west, and that India in the 19th and 20th century. So we start off and we examined yesterday the historical background, both, but not just the historical background, but then also the importance of both modern China and modern India, and why we need to approach both states and their history, and how the West has related to both states as is. So before we actually get started with today's lecture, which is relatively short, I wanted to ask a few questions to set the context for some of the documents that we're going to examine as well. So in yesterday's lecture, we did the background on nationalism and the growth of nationalism in China, the birth of the Communist Party, as it survived assaults from the Nationalist Party, which had unified China before. What we want to do is now to take a look at India. So from yesterday's lecture, hey, if you need to go back to it, go ahead and the link is still available to you. But go ahead and in your Google document form that you are admitting for today, you're going to go ahead and identify or list. So in other words, just bring up a few characteristics of either the history of India, or the modern state of India. So we did a little bit of both in the lecture, obviously. So with that, hey, if you could go ahead and in Google document, go ahead and identify, list some characteristics for us at this time. So go ahead and pause the video at this point and answer number 1 in your Google document. Okay, guys, we're back. Hopefully you've answered question 1. The fish. So where we left off and we look at the uh, history of India is actually with British intervention. Okay, so whereas you have a region of the world that has been very really unified together by a major empire, okay, India is unified not of its own volition, its own choice. Instead, it was by the British, okay, and particularly a British company called the British East India Company that started to create initially trade outposts, okay, in key ports and to make key alliances with some of the princely states and other various groups. Again, India is really divided, it's diverse, and so the British East India came in and started making alliances. They started hiring soldiers, mercenaries, particularly a group known as the sepoys, okay? And they started to not only make alliances, okay, but then also use sepoys to conquer parts of India, alliance with locals, and sign treaties, sometimes fair, sometimes unfair. But either way, it's the British East India Company that is going to end up commanding a huge part of India. It's a very strange concept. It's almost as if thinking about Amazon going to another foreign country and start to hire contracted soldiers and making deals with some local tribesmen and so forth, and eventually creating its own state. It's really odd. Okay. Now, all of this is going to come to blows in what becomes known as the Sepoy Mutiny. And in Indian history is often known as the First War of Independence, because this is the first time where the Indians themselves start strike back against British rule. Okay? And now there are many groups involved, not just the soldiers themselves, but also powerful priests, some local rulers of the old Mughal Empire who resisted. But it was a short attempt to free India from British rule, and it wasn't successful. Many people were killed, soldiers and their families. But the result was, as the British started to reorganize the state, the British government realized it needed to come into the picture. And so what they started to do was to bring in their own governors. And that created what is known as the Raj, or just simply the reign of the British government. And there were some key benefits to Britain coming into the picture, particularly in the West trying to instill its own religion, ideas, cultures, and others. And what they established for the first time is wide range literacy in a society where there are millions and millions of impoverished people in lower castes. All of a sudden now there's availability of education for the new middle class of those who are aligning themselves with the British, and also for the first time regarding women as well. Okay. Furthermore, the British, and really very few Englishmen are going to move to India. There are some, but many of them are going to go to India and they're going to hire thousands and thousands of civil servants. In other words, bureaucrats and government workers, okay, running the rail lines, doing the telegraph services, offloading materials and goods, um, collecting taxes. All of these things are actually done by Indians, hired by the British. And what it's going to create is Indian civil service of middle class Indians who are going to grow in terms of wealth. Then also they're going to have this identity crisis, which we'll get to later on, of should they be more British or should they be more Indian? And that's really for a lot of you guys who are immigrants to this country in the U.S. I mean, you feel that dilemma. Like how much of your own culture versus the culture that you're growing into should you accept? And that is also part of the cost as well. And we'll get to the social part in just a little bit, but there's some economic costs, including India, which throughout time of postmodern history, the desire of the Western world for Indian silks and fabrics has pushed explorers from Portugal and Britain and the Netherlands to India to trade. However, with the British East India Company and other corporations that are coming into play, and the development of industrial tools in Britain, right? The mill, the textiles that are now developed cloth, they're going to transform India from a net exporter of cotton and others to instead, okay, they're going to end up growing cotton. Okay, so a movement from being a developer of a material to now you're just growing the actual raw material products, which is not great for India because India and they export this cotton. This cotton going to find its way to the British mills, and the British mill ship this back to India and purchasing this stuff at a profit for Brit as opposed to India. Okay. Furthermore, there is the social cost as well. Okay? The British are going to see themselves as the local elites, okay? And it's their culture that they're going to attempt to implement at all costs. And so for Indians, no matter how much they grow, no matter how educated they, many of them are going to go to places like Oxford and Cambridge in Britain for their education, and eh, because of this, because of the notion that they are considered inferior, okay, and the racial identity, it will does not match the British. They're always going to see themselves as second-class citizens in their own homelands, okay, to the British. And this picture right here is really telling of a the British in India versus the Indians themselves. Okay. And so this is the point where we want to actually recap what you have just discussed, what we've discussed here. So go ahead and you're going to pause the video just a moment and you're going to answer question 2 in your Google document. What are the consequences of British rule over India? So that previous slide there, sum it up to the best of your ability. So go ahead now, pause the video and we'll come right back. All right, guys, we're back after you answered question number 2. Okay, things are going to change, okay, and a lot of it has to do with identity. Okay, it's hard and it's difficult when you are being raised with this notion that you are different than everyone else, okay? And this identity had to change. You need, in some ways, heroes that showed, look, we are an independent self from the ruling class. And so one man that demonstrated this was a man by the name of um, was a priest. His name was Raha Ram Mohan Roy, okay, who was an Indian religious, social, and educational reformer who challenged not just old traditional Indian ideas under the Hindu culture, but also criticized the British as well at that same time. He's oftentimes considered as not just a social reformer, but also as sort of the father of modern India as well. And from his particular works and subsequent disciples are going to form what is known as the Indian National Congress, made up of mostly English speaking and also English educated Hindus, many of which coming from the Indian civil service or elites who have aligned themselves with the British. A lot of them are living in the cities. They're lawyers, they are merchants, they are relatively wealthy Indians, and they are going to utilize a series of economic boycotts against the British, a call for what we call home rule. In other words, they don't necessarily want independence. They just want further rights. They want representation. They want to have a process of representation. In a lot of ways, what a lot of early American colonists prior to the revolution was calling for. They just wanted some representation, not necessarily independence as is. But this group was mostly Hindu, the second largest religion in India, and what continues to be Islam. And so, an adjoining organization known as the Muslim League was formed in 1908. And in both cases, the usage of economic boycott and other methods are going to come to be, including the ideas of a leader by the name of Mohandas K. Gandhi, who wrote this piece here, Nonviolence. And he's going to have a different way to fight the British. Okay? Not in the traditional sense of we're going to rebel, like in the Sepoy Mutiny, which didn't quite work as such, but he has a different tact that he's going to try to use. He tried it in South Africa when he was there, and it worked. And so, as a result of this, hey, take a look at some of his thoughts in the document in the Google Classroom page, and answer in your Google document. Okay, question number 3 through 10. So I suggest again, you go ahead and pause this video, spend some time. This will probably take about 15 minutes or so, and answer the questions to this particular document here. So again, pause the video and we'll come right back. All right. Hopefully, things have passed. Time has passed, and let's go and wrap up this time here. Gandhi, okay, in 1922, had written this piece here. Hey, is going to initiate in the late 1930s. He's going to create a very aggressive, okay, non-violent protests, okay, a series of boycott strikes and what we call non-cooperation mass movements. And a great example of this is the Salt March. So you're going to take a look at the Salt March in the 1930s, okay, through two different parts here. One, I'm going to link you, and it is in Google Classroom for today's assignment, a short video from the movie Gandhi about the Salt March. So go and take a look at that. And then from there, two other short documents, one of which is a short document from Gandhi to a British governor, Lord Irwin. The other is this political right here. You're going to go and answer these questions in the doc that you had before. And from there, that's all we have for today, because there is progress that is made in India for independence, but it will continue to be a British colony all the way up to the Second World War. And we're going to reconvene with India towards the latter of our curriculum. All right, guys, have a good one.